Good morning. I met Steve about 3 weeks ago, and when I met him this morning, he said, but back then you actually had a different shirt. And so I have different shirts that carrying key messages, and today is about focus, and last time it was about fall in love with the problem, not the solution. Now, the story of this shirt is very, very interesting because last week I was in Montreal doing a few presentations with Tel Aviv University, and in one of my meetings I met the Secretary of Innovation and Economics, and she really liked the shirt, and she said, I really like this shirt, so I gave the shirt to her. And when I was asked to speak at this conference, I said, but this is not my cup of tea, right? I'm doing very little in medical devices and very little in ag tech, and by the way, since then it changed. And so what exactly am I going to speak about? And the approach was that, entrepreneurs are entrepreneurs are entrepreneurs. It doesn't matter where they are. The reason that I'm actually here is because Ziv Tirosh, where is he? Stockton, actually made the introduction. So Ziv is a friend, a good friend. And when we started to discuss that a while ago, I got a little bit more familiar with this space, and I think it's important space. It's extremely important space because we change the world into a better place. And when we do that, this is the essence of everything that we're trying to do, make an impact. Change something that doesn't work good enough and make it a better. And it doesn't matter if this is on the IT space or on the medical devices space or in the agri-tech space. And I think this is all greatness. So in my presentation today, I will be speaking about the passion of entrepreneurs. Yeah, and a little bit about disruptions and some key learnings that are extremely important. So usually, most of the entrepreneur's journey that I ran into, they started with a very, very strong emotion. So either love or hate. I hate traffic jams, right? I hate waste. There are many things that I don't like. And when I run into them, I tell myself, it shouldn't be that way. But there are also things that you run into and you basically say, I really love that. I want everything to be like that. And you start to build your dream in your mind and you start to develop the passion. And immediately after that, you realize that you will need to sacrifice a lot of things in order to make it happen. And the journey is a roller coaster, and it's a long roller coaster, right? And so there was mentioned earlier about fundraising. So if you think that the journey is a roller coaster, then imagine fundraising as the same roller coaster, but in the dark. You don't even know what's coming, right? So, and this is how hard it is. And if someone will tell you that it's easy, maybe for other people it's easy. For me, it was always hard. And so to a certain extent, and at the same time, I would say, so I was sitting earlier this morning next to a gentleman, and he said that his son is actually building a startup and have many ideas. And so this is the story. This is an interesting story. If you would ask an entrepreneur, after this startup of yours, what exactly are you going to do? It's always the next startup. It's always the next startup. And in most cases, they actually know what the next startup is all about. So we launched Waze. We actually started a company in 2008, and in 2009, we launched the service. And I already knew what my next startup is all about. And by the time I got to that next startup of mine, I had a list of other startups that I wanted to build, and I will keep on building them. So entrepreneurship is exactly like falling in love, right? So imagine that there are many ideas that you're thinking of, and eventually you pick one and you say, this is the one. Or you go to many dates, and eventually you find the girl and you say, she is the one. And then it takes you a little bit of time that you actually incubate the idea in your mind, and you kind of look at it from different perspective, and you ask yourself all the hard questions, and you imagine the product, and you imagine the go-to-market, and you imagine the business model, and you imagine every part of it, or you spend time with your date, and you don't want to see anyone else. You don't care about the rest of the world. The only thing that you care about is that date, right? Until you feel confident enough. And then you start to tell your friends about this idea. And this is usually when they tell you this will never work, right? Or Or this is the stupidest idea that I ever heard, right? Anyone heard that before? Okay. So, or you take your date to meet your friends and they're saying, she's not for you, right? And this is exactly when you disengage from your friends. You need to be in love with your idea, because otherwise someone is going to scare you off, and they shouldn't. You should be in love with your idea and then go ahead and make it. Now the journey is long, and the longest part of it is the lack of traction, right? And so we can imagine the lack of traction in a phase that you basically say, I'm going to climb on this mountain, right? And so you actually figure out a way to climb on the mountain. You try from here, you try from here. You eventually find a way to climb on the mountain. And when you get to the top, you realize that this is not a mountain. This is just a hill before the next hill, right? And so you say, okay, so I need to climb on the next hill. So you go down, you climb up on the next hill, and then you figure out, okay, this is just another hill that only when you get to the top, you can actually see the rest of the journey. And it doesn't matter if you're trying to build a medical device and you go to, you try to build, any biomaterial or anything new into the agri-tech, and you find the first customer, and the first customer say, okay, show me, right? Let's do a trial, right? Here is a piece of area that you can try your stuff. And we need to wait for the right season, right? And so we wait for the right season and we try our stuff, and it actually does work, right? So we are very, very much excited about the fact that our stuff works. And then the guys say, you know what, this is interesting. Let's try next season, and I'll give you a little bit bigger piece of land to try that, right? Or and every time we think that we got it, we just one milestone in our journey. So the journey, by and large, is a journey of failures, because we tried to do something new and no one did that before. And it's not that there is a way that we can figure out how to do that. And we want to believe that we know, but in reality, we don't know. So we try something and it doesn't work. And so we try something else and it doesn't work. And we keep on trying stuff until we find the one thing that does work for us. And this is just buying us a ticket for the next part of the journey, right? So if the first part of the journey is let's show that our product works, now we need to figure out, so how do we grow? How do we scale? How do we go international? How do we sell? And as soon as we do that, then we need to figure out what is exactly the business model that makes sense for us. And maybe it's not the one that we thought about it from the beginning. And to a certain extent, I would say, if you're afraid to fail, then you already failed. Right? So Michael Jordan said that he can accept failure, but he cannot accept not trying. And because I was in Canada last week, and so Wayne Gretzky, the greatest hockey players of all time, say that he misses 100% of the shots that he doesn't take. If you don't try, you're not going to make it. So some of the key, the first year is dramatic because you set the direction, you define the problem you're trying to solve, you define the mission. You explain to yourself why the world is going to be a better place if you are successful. But you also starting a working place. And this is an opportunity to build the working place of your dreams. This is an opportunity to define the DNA of the company you are building, to make this place amazing. And when we started Waze, we decided that Waze is going to be the best working place we ever had. And we defined that. What does it mean for us? And we took examples from previous places and we defined that. And it turns out to be that way. And in the rest of the startups that I've built since then, this is pretty consistent. We are spending most of our time in that place. Then this place should be great. And to the level that that you love every day that you're there. Because if you're not building, if you're not defining the DNA of the company you're building, the company will have a DNA of itself, but not necessarily the one that you dreamed of. And this is interesting. A lot of entrepreneurs are coming to me, and they present their ideas, and I usually send them back, and I ask them how the market will change if you are successful. So describe the impact that you're going to make. And if you don't know how the market will change, maybe it's not big enough. Now, I'm not saying that this is important, not important. It might be very small in a very specific area, so the market is small, but you're still going to make an impact. If you don't know what's the impact, then go and figure that out. And celebrating. We say it's going to be a long journey, so part of the deal is to celebrate a lot of things, right? And so you celebrate the first product, first office, first investment, first time that someone writes on you on the paper, first employee, first user, first customer, first everything. And this is good. Much better than that if someone is suing you for patent infringement. That actually means that you are starting to make an impact, that someone's care. Because if you're small, no one cares, right? But if someone is suing you, that means that you're starting to make an impact. And the best is when you're starting to get from your customers thank you letters, right? They say, thank you, you helped me in this and this and this, right? You helped me to avoid traffic jams, you helped me to avoid speeding tickets. And then you know that you are actually creating value. So for a second, I would say the startup journey is very, very simple. What we are really looking for is a problem that it's worth solving. A problem that the world is going to be a better place if the problem disappears. And then we are looking to qualify this problem. So we need to imagine who actually have this problem and speak with those people. What we are looking for is their perception of the problem. Because we might have one perception, and we are an excellent sample of one person. That's it, one person. We need to get more perspectives in order to figure out how the problem is being perceived. And only then we can go ahead and build the solutions, because otherwise we might end up with a solution that is looking for a problem. And there are many of those that are strolling around the globe trying to figure out what exactly we are doing with this technology that we developed. So first of all, figure out what's the problem you're trying to address. What is the value proposition? By the way, a friend of mine is now starting to build a solution for greening in orchards, right? And so the problem is very, very focused, very, very defined. Along building the solution, there is a figure out that there are many things that we can do with the same technology that we are building. But you have to remain focused. You have to remain focused on the problem. So just a little bit of the Waze journey. Anyone here is not using Waze? Okay, thank you. I think that Waze turned out to be very successful in a lot of places, not just in Israel. There are about 300 million users of Waze globally, and this turns out to be extremely successful. And by the way, I left the day after the acquisition in order to start more startups. But the magic of Waze is that, and this is behind the scene, we try to build a service that helps the drivers to avoid traffic jams. And so in order to do that, we need to know where traffic is. And in order to figure out where traffic is, we need to have a lot of users that will be all over so we can figure out where traffics are. The problem is that back in 2007, in order to have a lot of users, you need to have free application. But the maps were extremely expensive back then. So digital maps, if we wanted to buy them, that were very, very expensive. Now, if you are going to spend a lot of money on buying maps and you're going to give away for free the app, that business model doesn't really work. And it's not a good idea. And so we figure out that we need to actually build our own maps. And this is the magic of Waze. Waze builds its own maps. And when we started, that was the map of Tel Aviv, blank page. There was nothing on the map. Now, the first driver that drove, we collected the GPS data out of the device, and if we will take this data and draw that on this blank page, it would look like that. Now, if we will take that from a lot of drivers, it's actually starting to look like a map, right? If I will tell you that this is a traffic circle in the middle, it is a traffic circle. By the way, I assume that there are some people that already recognize where it is. The traffic circle is Kikar Hamdina. When you look at this data, you look at it and you can actually figure out where is a main road versus street. You can figure out if there is an intersection that no one is making left turns, then no left turn is allowed, right? If there is a road that there are 100 people going into one direction and no one else coming the other direction, that will be one-way street, right? Pretty straightforward. If there is a road that there are 100 people going into one direction and there are only 2 coming the other direction, that is one-way street in Tel Aviv. So visitors, this is how we drive. If you drive around here, please take that into consideration. But if you would have a computer science background, then you would know that if I can describe that, we can build it. And so this is exactly what we did. We built a system that takes all this data and creates the map out of that. And in order for the map to become complete, we enabled map editing tools to allow people to provide us with street names and house numbers and points of interest and additional information. Now at this phase, if all of a sudden we will have someone that is driving slow, then we can figure out that there is a traffic jam here. And if we have a lot of those all over, then we can figure out where all traffic jams are and start to route people to avoid the traffic jams. Now, the problem, to a certain extent, I would say that Israel is a very small place and the number of alternatives is limited. And so sometimes, even though that we really want to route people to avoid traffic jams, there is no way to avoid them. What we are actually seeing in this video is how the map was created in a few places in Eastern Europe. And this is, by the way, so this is Bratislava in Slovakia, and the Slovakian president is now in Israel, and I actually going to meet him after this session. So the first time that he invited me to Slovakia, he said, "But don't you want to see the place that your video is showing?" And so I said yes, and turned out that before he was president, he was actually an entrepreneur by himself, and he built a company and sold the company, and so it took about 6 months for the map to become good enough. Now, this is nowhere near in the space that we are looking at in agriculture technology or in medical devices. There are no such thing as 6 months journeys. But it's only the beginning of the journey, right? So it turns out to be okay in Eastern Europe, right? So in Slovakia and Czech Republic, in Latvia. Turned out to be okay in Ecuador and Colombia and Venezuela and so a few places in Latin America. But in the rest of the world, it was not okay. It was not good enough. And so before we go there, so we started the journey in 2007 when Ehud Shabtai and Amir and myself met, and we decided that we're going to make a startup out of that. Ehud actually started the concept in 2006, and he built an application that is running on a PDA, right? So remember PDA? Long time ago, so just a little bit after the dinosaurs, there were PDAs, and then Nokia phones, and this is where we are today. And he built the first application on a PDA that actually creates the map as you drive. And when we met in 2007, we say that this is interesting, but we really, in order to make an impact, we need to have real-time traffic. And so we decided that we're going to take that from a non-connected devices into a smartphone, and that we're going to build a company. And we, build the story and define to ourselves the DNA of the company that we want to build, and we identify the people that we're going to hire, and we went fundraising. And we already in love with the story, and we think that the story is amazing, right? And you go to venture capitals, and they say no. And you go to others, and they say no. And along this journey, I find out that there are 100 different ways to say no, and I know all of them. And eventually, and this is just just a little bit of perspective. Eventually, we had a term sheet and multiple term sheets, but the first investor was Vertex, and we met one of the partners there, and another of the partners, and then they invited us to all hands, so all the partners meetings, and we needed to present. And before we go there, we figure out the home addresses of all the partners, and we made sure that they are on the map. And not just that, we made sure that there are other houses in their neighborhood that are on the map, so it's not the unique one, right? And sure enough, during the presentation, the managing partner asked me, okay, so what you're telling me is that in this model, it's possible that my house is on the map. And I said, I don't know where you live, so you'll tell me where you live and we'll see, right? And he said his address, and obviously the house was there, and he was, at that moment, he decided to invest. And that was end of 2007, beginning of 2008, we actually got money and started a company, and we launched the service only in 2009. And initially, we launched the service here in Israel, and it was actually pretty good in Israel. So there were enough users, and Tel Aviv and the high-tech industry in general is very, very concentrated and very, very socialized. So word of mouth works, and a lot of people downloaded the service, and it turns out beautifully. So we decided that, this model can work everywhere, and so we made it available everywhere. And that was end of 2009, and then what happened in 2010, it was simply not good enough. Right, so this was the lack of traction period for us, and that's a nightmare, right? So imagine that I'm in an industry that is so much faster than any other industry, right? I can build a new version in 2 weeks, launch that, and try that out. And this is exactly what we did, right? So we gathered the information, we figure out what doesn't work, we build a new version, we launched a new version, and we know that this is it. And it's not. And so we keep on collecting the data, we speak with drivers, we figure out what doesn't work, we fix that, we launch the next version, and it's not. And we had 1 year of iterations trying to make it work. And this is like crossing the desert, right? So you walk all day, and there is only sand around you. You don't even pay attention to the fact that you're making progress. And you keep on doing that, right? You go to sleep at night, you wake up in the morning, and it doesn't work. And this is exactly the time of period that during the day, everyone in the company is pretty sure that we're gonna win. And when you go back home, you actually cry. It doesn't work. I would like to quote Ben Horowitz on that. So one of the major venture capitals in the US, Andreessen Horowitz. Ben Horowitz was a CEO of a company, and he was once asked if he was sleeping well as a CEO, and he said, I slept like a baby. I woke up every 2 hours and cried. And if you have this part of the journey that you, at the day, you think that this is it, and at night you think that this is not going to make it, this is the part of the journey. Now, eventually, it took us the whole year of iterations to figure that out. And in 2011, we started to reach critical mass in multiple places. We reached critical mass in the US. It was Los Angeles first, and San Francisco, and Chicago, and Atlanta, and Washington, D.C., and New York, and one metropolitan after that. In Europe, that was Italy first, and then Netherlands, and France, and Spain, and Sweden, and one country after that. And then we know that the model actually works. There is a point of time that you actually can figure that out, that this is it, you're gonna win. 2012, Waze was growing faster than the entire navigation industry altogether. So faster than all the devices, all the in-car navigations, all the applications combined. And then in 2013, Google came out with a proposal to acquire us, and we simply said yes. That was once my dad told me that if someone makes you an offer that you cannot refuse, then you don't refuse. Very simple. Now, it made perfect sense for us, and today you look at the amazing acquisition of Mobileye, and you say, okay, this is 15 times bigger than Waze, and I think that part of it is because we set a milestone for everyone to overachieve, and that's amazing. But at the time, that was the biggest amount paid for an application ever. That was the biggest acquisition of an Israeli company in the consumer space ever. And we thought that this is an amazing deal. And it turns out to be an amazing deal. And And so this is maybe perhaps the most important slide of today. Who are our users? Okay, who are the buyers? Who are the customers of yours? And what's their perception of the problem? If we are missing that, we are building something completely wrong. Now it's pretty easy to figure that out. All we have to do is ask, right? So we define the problem, and we go and we ask people if this is really their perception of the problem. And they will tell us because, if the problem bothers them, they are looking for a solution as well. Making mistakes fast. In IT and in consumer space, this is by and large the key component for becoming successful. Because if you make the mistakes fast, then you have an opportunity to fix them fast. Now, this is pretty consistent, right? At the end of the day, in order to win the competition, you need to be good enough. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be better than the competition. And you need to move faster than the competition. So, Israelis, raise your hand for a second. Just want to see how many of them. Okay, great. So, most of the Israelis after the army, they usually go to South America or to the Far East. But there is a story about a couple of guys that decided that they're going to go on a safari in Africa. And they went into this safari in Africa, and after a little while, they said, but this is for families. There is no adventures here. There are no risks. So let's do something that is more dangerous, right? And so they decided that they're going to spend the night outside of the camp. And so they took the tent, and they figured they built the tent outside of the camp. And sure enough, during the middle of the night, there is a roar of a lion. And so they woke up, and that was a pretty scary moment for them. And so one guy said, what are we going to do? What shall we do? What shall we do? And so the other guy say, let's run back to the camp. And the other guy say, oh yeah, this is a good idea. And he started to put on his sneakers. And so the other guy told him, what, are you nuts? You really think you're going to outrun the lion? He said, no, I need to outrun you. We need to be faster than the competition. I think the last bullet is a pretty amazing bullet. It's so I'm grateful and thankful for meeting a lot of entrepreneurs. And sometimes I'm interviewing entrepreneurs because I'm looking for someone to run my startups or build a new startup. And I was recently interviewed at dozens of entrepreneurs, and all of them had their last startup was unsuccessful. And so I asked them why. And half of them said the team was not right. So team was not right, maybe someone was not good enough, maybe they actually had the same skill set and they needed diversification, maybe it was an ego management issue. Team was not right. And then I asked them, and when did you know that the team is not right? And all of them said within the first month. And so the problem is not that the team was not right. The problem was that they didn't do anything about it. Now, making easy decisions is easy. Making hard decisions is hard. And usually saying the team is not right, we need to get rid of someone, is the hardest decisions that we will have in our lifetime. And this is the CEO needs to make because anyone else don't want to make the hard decisions. Now, if the CEO doesn't make that hard decisions, and this is a different perspective of it, if there is a team of people, everyone in the team know exactly how to rank the team. So if you have a team of 15 engineers or 15 salespeople or 15 support or whatever it is, it doesn't matter what it is. Everyone in the team, if you would ask them, okay, who are the top performers? They will tell these are the top performers, right? And who are doing pretty good job? These are doing pretty good job. And who are less than average, then they will tell you. And who shouldn't be here, they will tell you. So the team knows. Now, if the CEO doesn't do anything, there are only two options. One, the CEO doesn't know, which means that he is stupid. Two, he does know and doesn't do anything, which means that he doesn't have the ability to make the hard decisions. At both cases, what would happen is that the top performers would leave because they don't want to be in a mediocre organization. And the organization will become mediocre because the CEO is not making the hard decisions. I had this dialogue with a group of entrepreneurs, and at the end of that, one of them came to me and said, "Thank you, I'm going to fire one of my partners today." And so I actually made an impact in that sense. And fundraising, and this is in particular, so at least, in the IT space, there is a lot of venture capitals and a lot of money available in the market, and it's still very, very hard to raise capital. In this space, it's even harder because it doesn't necessarily fit into the model of venture capitals. The journey is longer, and the time to exit is sometimes longer than what venture capitals are looking for. But I met with one of the largest venture capitals a little while ago, and I asked one of the managing partners, how long does it take you to decide if you like the entrepreneurs or not? And so the guy asked me, okay, do you want the right answers or do you want the real answers? And I said, I want the real answers. So he was looking at me and then looking at the door and looking at me again and looking at the door again. And he said, before they sit down. Now this is critical to understand, right? This is how long it takes us to actually establish the first impression, a matter of seconds. And then we have maybe a couple of minutes to either let it sink or change that. And so the result in both cases is that we have to start with the strongest point that we have, whatever it is, right? Even if they ask us to tell us a little bit about ourselves, if the strongest point that we have built a team of the top 5 engineers in this space, then this is what we're going to start with. It doesn't matter what they ask. We have to start with the strongest point at the beginning. In most cases, they are users too, right? If they don't see themselves as using it and they cannot relate to someone else that will be using it, they're not going to invest. Now, this makes it very, very hard in medical devices and in agriculture technology, right? Because most of the venture capitals are not coming from this space. And storytelling. At the end of the day, when you ask investors, why did you invest in a particular startup? They will give you the same answer. We like the CEO, we like the story. That's it, nothing else. We like the CEO, we like the story. So there are 2 conclusions. Number 1, you have to learn how to tell a good story. If you don't know how to tell a story, then go and learn how to tell a good story. The other part of it is that the CEO goes to those meetings alone, because anything else is irrelevant, right, to the decision making. We like the CEO, we like the story, right? If there are other people there, then they are actually distraction. If the investor would like to see the rest of the team, they would like to see the rest of the team just to make sure that you actually establish leadership with them, not for any other reason. At the end of the day, if you need to replace someone in your team, that's a CEO problem. If we need to replace the CEO, it's an investor problem. They don't care about the CEO problem. For venture capitals, it has to be a big market. If the market is not big enough, it doesn't fit their model. That simply doesn't fit their model. Now it's becoming much more complex because then you say, okay, so I would like to go to private equity. They might, if I am going to do 2 or 3x on the money, then for private equity, it's actually pretty good. But there is also a matter of timing. And so we might end up in either going public early or actually going into family offices. And this is where most of the money is, not on venture capitals, family offices. I'm going to skip that. Actually, maybe not, just a perspective. A lot of time I hear about disruptive technology. And I would nearly say technology is not disruptive. Disruption means that we change market equilibrium. We change the way we are doing business. And this could be through a new product, it could be through a new price. Waze was free. Now this is dramatic. You go to a market that everyone pays and you basically say this is free. And you change the market for everyone. Sometimes it's about changing the business model. Sometimes it's about creating information that is otherwise is not available or available only to one part of the market. And in most cases, disruptors are newcomers. They are the ones that have nothing to lose. Existing players do not disrupt their own market. They have too much to lose and they're not going to even try. Now, part of the fact that they're not going to try is within this organization that is already a real business in the market, there are people that are experts. If you change their underlying assumptions, if you basically tell them, you know, everything that we are doing so far is wrong, then they lose their expert position, and they don't want that. And so that would eventually prevent in their subconscious any changes that can lead into disruption. So if you're in an organization and you try to make a dramatic change and it doesn't work, get out. Get out and make it yourself. So a few words about myself. I'm building startups, right? So actually there is a thinner version of me on the picture. And I build startups because I think this is how I'm going to make an impact, and this is how I would like to change the world. And I focus only on consumer services, but it doesn't say that I wouldn't consider something else that is going to make an impact. And it's usually about creating a lot of value to a lot of people. Now, part of the fact that I like consumer services is actually the ability to get immediate interaction with the user, so I can get feedback faster, and I don't like to wait. So here are my startups so far. Ways we are familiar with. Move It. Anyone here is using Move It? So like Waze, but for public transportation, actually answering the same question that Waze does. How do I get from here to wherever I want to go right now, but using public transportation? One thing that is very, very interesting about Move It, it's actually growing faster than Waze at the time. So when you compare how long did it take Waze to reach 50 million users and how long it take Move It to reach 50 million users, Move It was much faster. FX deals with the biggest secret in the world, financial fees. In the US alone, there are $600 billion of financial fees every year, 600 billion. Right? This is more than twice the GDP of Israel. And the scary part is that people don't know that they're paying them. And I mentioned earlier that in 2009, I knew that this is going to be my next startup. 2008 was a terrible year on the market, and beginning of 2009, I get my Keren Ishtalmut statement, and so my study fund, and I look at it, and I lost 20% on the market. And in addition, they charged me 1.5% to lose money. And so I was frustrated, and I was even more frustrated with the fact that I didn't know than with the fact that they actually charged me for that. And I started to ask my friends how much fees they're paying, and none of my friends knew. None of my friends actually knew. And this is where I decided that, number one, if no one knows, it's a secret, right? That's the definition of secret. And number two, this is going to be my next startup. To a certain extent, when I was young, my dad once told me that if you don't know how much you are paying, then you're paying too much. So this is FX. We deal with the fees. We help people to understand how much money they're paying, not percentage, not basis point. And if you think that 1% a year is not a big deal, right, so in our mind, if I'll go to a store and I will ask for a discount and they will say, you know what, we're going to give you 1% discount, that's ridiculous, right? But in fees, in the accumulation of them year after year, over the lifetime saving, that might end up as 1/3 of your lifetime saving. So we show people in money how much does it mean, and then what to do in order to reduce them. Rumor is a marketplace for non-refundable hotel reservation. So just imagine situation that you make travel plans and make hotel reservation, and then you change your plans and you get stuck with reservations that you cannot use. And you actually throw good money down the drain. And so a marketplace is actually a pretty good place to establish efficiency in the market. Zik is another marketplace, a marketplace for store credit. So you return something to the store, you get the store credit, and that you can use within this chain. Turns out that 30% of those are never being used. 30%. Now, this is $100 billion a year. $100 billion of unused real money. And Zik is simply a marketplace for that. Angie deals with the frustrations of going to the mechanic. If I will take my car to the mechanic, whatever they'll say, I'll say, okay, I have no clue, right? If they will tell me that I need to replace the carburetor in my car, then I will say, you know what, go ahead and replace the carburetor, right? There is no carburetor in my car, right? There are no cars with carburetors for the last 2 decades. But that's the idea. We don't know. And so Angie is an app running on the smartphones, connects to the car computer, doing the diagnostics for you, and then asking for quotation to repair that. So empower the driver not only with the knowledge, but also with the ability to do price comparison. By the way, the carburetor actually reminds me an interesting story. So this teenager guy calling his dad and say, Dad, I think there are waters in the carburetor of the car. And his dad saying, what? No, this is impossible, it can't be. Say, yeah, there is water in the carburetor of the car. Do you even know what a carburetor is? Say, no. Then why do you think there are waters in the carburetor of the car? Well, I backed up the car into the swimming pool. And so that would be a good reason why we would have water in the carburetor of the car. Fairfly deals with the biggest secret in the travel industry, and this is what happened to airfare after we book our flight. And in reality, no one knows because we don't check that, right? So beforehand, we will go to Kayak or Travelocity or different online travel agency, and we will compare prices, and we will, watch them over a few days, and eventually we will make the purchase decision, and we will make the reservation. And then what happened to the price? The price keeps on going up and down based on the demand. But we don't know that. So what Fairfly does, monitor your own itinerary. And as soon as the price drops and drops below cancellation fees of either your own flight or maybe an alternative flight, it basically tells you, okay, right now you're leaving money on the table and you can actually rebook the same flight at a lower price. Now, their focus right now is actually on corporates that have large travel spending, but I think that's actually turned out to be very valuable to pretty much everyone. SpamOff is one of the recent creation, deals with SMS spam, actually fights SMS spam. And this is maybe the startup that I'm most proud of because it's my son that gets off the army about a little bit over a year ago, and the day after started his first startup. And I was proud because it's about doing good and doing well. It's about fighting something that it's worth fighting for. And in reality, it's part of a set of startups that I'm likely to build in the next few years, which deals with regulation that doesn't work, right? So there is an Israeli law from 2008 that spam is illegal. And still what we have seen since then is that spam is actually increasing and not decreasing. And it's only started to decrease now after SpamOff started their service. And that will be the same with income tax, right? 80% of the employees in Israel are actually entitled to refund on their income taxes. 80%. But no one is doing anything about it. That's probably true for VAT claims in Europe, right? You travel to Europe, you buy something, and you actually can get the VAT back, right? Which is pretty significant. In Europe, it's depending on the country, it's between 18 to 25%, right? Now, it turns out that there are 30 billion euros of VAT refunds potential every year, and only 1.5 is being claimed. So only 5%, 95% of the cases, it's not being claimed even, right? So you go to the airport and you know that you bought something new and you should get your money back or some of the money back. And you get to this Global Blue office and they say, but you need to stamp the custom. Right? Okay, great. So I'll go and stamp the custom. Where's the custom? Oh, that's before security. Right? There's always something bad happen to that. And this is what happened to 95% of the cases, that this money even though that it's on the table and belong to the people, it's not being claimed. And there are many in these categories, that there is regulation, there is an intent, but the execution do not follow. And in general, this is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for all the little things that frustrate us on a daily basis. And if they are big enough, I'll try to solve them. So maybe one more story. And during the Waze years, I have a lot of people coming to me and say, thank you for Waze. You helped me to avoid traffic jam, or you helped me to avoid speeding tickets, or actually, I just figured out another story about that. So my son got a speeding ticket 2 months ago. And when he got home, I asked him, okay, did you use Waze? And he said, no. I said, you're an idiot. And then go and pay it yourself. But during the years, I had many people coming to me, and usually I hear consistent stories. But then about a year ago, someone came to me and said, thank you, you saved my marriage. And I said, what? I said, because of Waze, we don't need to argue anymore in the car, so you saved my marriage. And so for a year, I thought that this is the greatest story that I ever had. But then my kids actually are pretty creative in that sense. And some 6 months ago, I asked my 18-year-old son to drive me to the airport. And he really likes to drive. That's the same guy that actually got a speeding ticket. And he said, my phone is broken, I can't. And I said, what do you mean you can't? Here's the car, here are the keys, drive me to the airport. He said, my phone is broken, I don't know how to get there. And then I said, you know what, I'm going to be in the car with you, I'll tell you how to get there. And then he said, and how would I come back? So we lose orientation, but not logic. Thank you.